Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a frighteningly good time celebrating Halloween yesterday. I'm still recovering from a monstrous sugar rush myself, but enough spooky tales. Let's talk about something even scarier, the future of platform engineering. Now, I know what you're thinking. Platform engineering? That sounds as exciting as an empty haunted house. But trust me, our speaker today will change your mind. Please welcome Daniel Brown, Senior Consultant at Improving. Daniel brings over 15 years of IT experience to the table. His expertise lies in platform engineering and cloud architecture, backed by certifications from AWS, Azure, and GCP. Today, he'll show us how to combine these powerful architectures to create something extraordinary. We'll explore real-world cases, best practices, and trends reshaping our industry. Think of it like a haunted mansion, but instead of ghosts, we've got cloud convergence and digital transformation. Instead of scares, we've got scalability, flexibility, and cost efficiency. Pretty spooky, right? Before we begin, please note the Q&A button in your Zoom interface. Please feel free to post questions anytime during the talk. I'll be here to relay them to Daniel while he's speaking. So let's now take this time to give a warm welcome to Daniel Brown. Get ready to be spooked by the future of platform engineering.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that wonderful introduction. You guys are here for leveraging multi and hybrid architectures for next-gen platform engineering. Karl von Clausewitz, Prussian military theorist. Some consider him the father or one of the fathers of modern nation states. He said that war is the extension of politics by other means. Now, what he meant by that was that war is simply a tool in the bag of the state. It is not anything other than just another pressure that can be used to exert political will and achieve political goals, just like economic pressure might be, or maybe some kind of moral pressure. Now let's take Karl's saying and let's say, use some poetic license to shoehorn it into what we're talking today. Let's get rid of that. And let's bring it back with more of a modern flavor for what our purposes are. Cloud is the extension of business objectives by other means. So this is really the big idea today. You came for hybrid cloud, you came for multi-cloud, but really the basic idea is that cloud, as well as IT, is really just another tool in the bag for the business objectives. It's something for achieving business needs. Keep that in mind as you're building out, because this can get lost along the way as you travel on your cloud journey. So let's just start with something very basic. I do these talks all the time, and I like to really get to the bottom of things, and I don't want to make too many assumptions on things. So what exactly is the cloud? It's an idea that is, I would say, probably 90% marketing. The cloud is really just, instead of having servers that you manage, you're lending servers from somebody else. You're using resources that somebody else is running. I did a patio project probably about 2 years ago, and I had to get 1.5 tons of patio pavers from Home Depot. Rather than try to use my own vehicle to haul those pavers, I went to Home Depot and rented one of these flatbed trucks. And it was a pretty good deal. That's what the cloud is. Instead of using your own truck, you're going to Home Depot and renting their truck to haul things. Instead of having your own servers that you're running, you're renting somebody else's servers for a short amount of time. So what is the cloud? There is no cloud. Cloud is just marketing. It's just someone else's computer. That's all it is. So think about that and keep that in mind as you go through this. Let's just start to dig in here. Okay, so we have hybrid cloud, we have multi-cloud, we have on-prem, we have single cloud. I put together this Venn diagram to show you that things get fairly complicated fairly quickly. So you could actually have just an on-prem right here, or you could have just cloud, or you could have a little bit of on-prem and a little bit of cloud. So that is, you could have servers that are in your data center. You could be storing data in your data center, and you could also be utilizing some of the cloud resources that are out there. And if that's the case, then you're a hybrid cloud. You could be using cloud resources in one cloud and then another cloud, and you could be a multi-cloud. You could have stuff on-prem and in the cloud and multiple clouds, and maybe you're a hybrid multi-cloud. The permutations are, I wouldn't say infinite, but there's quite a few permutations that you can have with this particular setup. So let's dig in a little further. Let's talk first about hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is kind of this integration of public cloud with existing resources on premise. They can be resources that you own in your own data center that's actually on the property. It can be down the road, it doesn't matter. But the idea behind a hybrid cloud is that you can extend your IT infrastructure without building more, right? So you have this on-premise data center, and maybe you're utilizing Azure for storing backups of your on-prem, because you're thinking, well, we have backups on-prem that are stored in a shed that's down the hallway. But if everything burns down, then well, maybe we need to have backups in the cloud to keep it. Maybe we have legacy systems that we really don't want to move to the cloud quite yet. Say we have mainframes or something that are on premise, and we want to have some maybe JavaScript apps that are running in the cloud that kind of interface sort of with the mainframes that are on premise. It's a way to keep those legacy systems kind of where they're at and still have some modern UI on top of it, or modern ways to access that data without moving that data and refactoring, which could be very, very expensive. It's also about control, having this hybrid cloud. All of that data that you find very sensitive as a company, maybe you want that data on premise. You want it in your own data center. You want to be able to say, I know what hard drive that's on. It's on that particular SANS over there, and we know it's there. So combining the cloud and the on-premise, that's hybrid cloud. Let's talk about multi-cloud. What does kind of a multi-cloud utilization look like? It's putting multiple cloud providers together so that you have kind of different services that you can access for different value propositions. Something that might be is you might have, say, AWS for running all of your web applications that are client facing, but you may have an ERP system that is in the Oracle cloud. Maybe you need both of those things together. Maybe you're using an Exchange server and you're running all Microsoft applications, Microsoft business applications like Word and Outlook and everything, and you're using the Microsoft cloud that is Azure, basically. So you may have 3 different cloud things that you put together. It might be that you're doing multi-cloud for resiliency purposes, and we're going to dig more into this. But basically, running multi-cloud gives you more options. And it might help you to avoid vendor lock-in. Oh, vendor lock-in. I hear that a lot when I hear executives and higher level people talking about cloud. And I don't know if we can go into this one cloud because, what if they lock us in and then we're trapped? Well, let's dig into it. Let's talk about that. So before we do that, I'd like to kind of dig into this idea of on-prem only. There are a lot of organizations that want to circle the wagons, and they say, you know what, this cloud thing, we don't trust it. We don't think it's good. We think we're going to get robbed as far as pricing goes. So we're just going to keep things on premise completely. That is a possibility. What about software as service or platform as service offerings? Like, are you going to use an on-premise version of web conferencing? Are you going to have your own Zoom that runs from your data center? Well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. You know, what about Teams? What about a chat app? You can't run Slack on premise, so you have to kind of go to another provider, and there are other providers for that. What about an Exchange server? When I started in IT, my first company that I went to work for out of college, we had an Exchange server that ran in an on-premise data center. And we had multiple trunk lines going in from different telecom companies. I think it was like Quest and Bell South or something like that at that time, just to be able to have some redundancy on the internet coming in. Those days feel like they're almost gone. Even huge companies like AT&T, like NCR, are using some cloud services. They may have huge amounts of on-premise stuff, but they're using some cloud services to help supplement their on-prem stuff. I don't know that this on-prem only is even a thing anymore. So much of the innovation and the technology that is being developed with a cloud option or maybe a cloud requirement. It's a little bit like trying to buy a carbureted only car nowadays. Most cars, if they're still using fuel at all, are fuel injection. Fast forward 50 years, it might be that trying to buy a gasoline car is almost impossible too. I think that's where we're getting to, and that's where we're at. It's still a possibility, but the options are getting slimmer and slimmer. And it's fewer and fewer for being able to run a completely on-prem IT infrastructure. So let's talk about some of these reasons. Why would you choose a hybrid or multi-cloud solution? Not just a cloud solution, but why would you try to do hybrid or multi-cloud? So maybe it's something like risk management. I think that's kind of the one thing that comes to everybody's mind to start with is we need some resiliency. We need to avoid outages. My gosh, AWS US West 1 region was down for 24 hours. We can't just be in AWS. We have to be in another cloud provider too. So we need to do that in order to avoid these outages. We need to have some disaster recovery. If they're down, we want to be able to spin up our IT, our infrastructure stack in another cloud. We need to make sure that we can keep running even when other people are down. We need to go past the 99.9% efficiency and uptime. Those are good reasons to be in a multi-cloud or a hybrid environment where maybe you're trying to hedge against on-premises being down. Another thing is avoiding vendor lock-in. Okay, let's dig into this one. This one is a big topic, so I want to make sure and give this a lot of love. Let's talk about the pros and the cons of using a single cloud solution. One of the pros is platform utilization. So if you are on a single cloud and you use their services and you adopt their managed native services, you're going to be able to get very, very powerful usage out of it. You're going to be able to use things like, say, in AWS, a messaging queue, SQS. You can use their queuing system and not have to worry about, say, running your own RabbitMQ. It's so easy and it's cheap. Oh my gosh, it's so cheap. You could send millions of messages, maybe or queue up millions of items for almost nothing. Better integration. So if you have a single cloud that you're working on, you can really write your source code. You can make your tech stack to really match what that cloud has to offer and use the best of breed technologies in that cloud. Something else that's good is you can have a single point of contact for support. If you have multi-cloud or even partially on-prem, you don't have a single wringable neck as much. So you could contact your cloud provider and say, well, there's a problem. And they could say, oh, well, maybe there's a problem with the other cloud provider. Maybe there's a problem with your connection on-prem. There's a lot of finger pointing that can happen. If you have one cloud provider, you have a single point of contact for support. Cost incentives. You can get some savings for reserved instances, bulk pricing, and also simplified billing, which is not to be underestimated, because cloud billing is one of those things that's very, very obscure. I think it's one of those things that needs to be understood more by organizations. I think I've advocated for this, that there needs to be a certified cloud accountant for these public clouds. So you have a solutions architect, DevOps certification, cloud accountant certification for being able to track costs in the cloud. Nobody's listened to me on that yet, but I think that will happen, maybe. I think it should happen, whether it does or not. Okay, so some of the cons for being in a single cloud solution is it's harder to switch between providers. If you were running, say, containers in AWS and GCP, and AWS were to go down, you could maybe switch your container loads over to GCP if you're already there. If you're not already there, it's going to be hard to switch over. There could be technical limitations in how the technologies run because they don't offer certain services on the single cloud that you have chosen. Now, I think that's a little bit of a weak argument. In general, what I've seen as a professional that's been in the industry for a couple of years, whenever a single cloud provider has a technology that they're offering, the other cloud providers almost always go copy it or try to make something very similar. However, it may not be a one-to-one mapping, so often you have to kind of refactor or kind of retry things to be able to get it to map. However, if you're in multiple clouds, maybe you've already figured out how that mapping is going to work. There's a strategic dependency in being in one cloud. Fortunes of your company are somewhat tied to that single cloud. If AWS has issues, if they're not profitable, if they're laying people off, your fortunes are tied to that. Maybe that means that there's going to be less support. Maybe there's going to be less services, new services offered. You are tying your fate in some ways to that cloud provider. Okay, there's also the cost risk of being in a single cloud. You are subject to price increases. And as these cloud providers are successful, they do tend to raise their prices. Though every single cloud conference I've been to, they always brag about, almost virtual signaling, how they have kept prices down and they have in some cases made things cheaper. It feels like a lot of marketing and it feels like a lot of, like I said, virtue signaling, but there may be some truth to that. But being in multiple clouds and being able to shift your workload, you could actually say, oh, I think the dream is like, oh, virtual machines have gone up 10% in this cloud provider. Let's shift it over to the other cloud provider for this month. I don't think we're quite there, but I think we're getting close to that. And I know a lot of people are trying to work on something like that. The migration can be costly if you have to migrate from one single cloud to another. If you're in multiple clouds, maybe shifting the workload isn't as big a deal. At the very minimum, you don't have to set up the accounts, the relationships, the management. One thing also with the con is you may have to have multiple people for a particular job. So it might be that you don't have one cloud engineer that is very good in GCP and one that's good in Azure. Maybe you have an Azure one and a GCP one. It makes things very complex for sure. And I think I'll go more into that in a bit. Okay, so regulation and compliance. So it could be that you are beholden to some kind of industry compliance, like maybe PCI or HIPAA. And it might be that you have to have that data encrypted on premise, maybe, probably not, but could be. It might be that you have to have several copies of that data because of a particular industry compliance issue. I know that the clouds are very sensitive to these issues. And in general, you do better pointing to, say, auditors, pointing them to policies in the public cloud than saying, yes, we're doing everything correct. Let's show you. You're going to be under a lot more scrutiny having all that stuff on premises than you would in the cloud, because the cloud has figured out a lot of these things. Now, it might be that you have to have multiple clouds to meet that criteria that they have, but who knows? There could be a geographical need. If you're in certain countries, it might be that the data has to be stored in that particular country. Maybe you have customers that are in Germany, and in order to service in that country, that data has to stay in Germany. So maybe multiple clouds are needed in order to put that data in a particular place so that you can meet that government need that's over you. It might be that there's a service level agreement that you have with customers or clients. I mentioned NCR earlier. If they're processing credit cards, they may have to be up 99.69s or something like that. And in order to make that 6.9s, they may have to be in multiple clouds, or they may have to have a combination of on-prem resources and also cloud resources. There's additional business reasons that you may have for being in multiple clouds. So your company goes out and buys another company. That company is running in Azure, but you guys are running in AWS, or that company's running in IBM and you guys are running in AWS. It might be cheaper for the time being, as you're integrating your IT infrastructure with theirs, to keep them in IBM for a couple years, because the cost of moving is just going to be so prohibitively high that we have to come up with a reason to move before we move. Cost optimization. So it could be that, I talked about this earlier, maybe running containers in GCP is cheaper than running them in AWS. So you want to be able to maybe run your back end on GCP and run your front end on AWS. Probably not, but it might be that that's a cheaper option. It might be that running certain parts of your system, like say, we want to run a data lake in Azure, and we want all of the Azure Fabric stuff, but we would prefer to run our web application in another cloud. That would be not so much cost, or it could be cost, but it might be a specialization thing where one particular cloud has something special, or that something you want to use over another cloud. Okay, so let's talk about alternatives to multi-cloud. I would ask this question if you are in a single cloud right now and thinking about going multi-cloud for whatever business reason you have. The question is have you exhausted all of your single cloud possibilities? So say you're doing it for resiliency. You are doing it so that if your infrastructure goes down, you have other infrastructure that comes up, or maybe it's already available, it's as hot storage or whatever, that it can just fail over to that. Well, most of the big public clouds have ways to have your stuff geo-replicated or replicated over different regions. So it might be that East US goes down, but you have everything replicated to West US too. So you could have this active region go down, and then over there at the front, at Azure front door, you can swap over to the standby region. All of your DNS or load balancers or whatever will point to the standby region if the active region goes down. This is a lot simpler than trying to integrate two cloud solutions that are maybe a little bit, maybe completely different. A lot of times, especially I know with Azure, a lot of times it's just check boxes. It's, all right, we're going to check this box on Cosmos DB, and all of a sudden it has two copies of it. It's replicating across the country with one checkbox click. That's a lot easier than saying, okay, we're going to replicate our Cosmos DB over to GCP. It may make sense, but maybe it doesn't make sense. I would say look at alternatives before adopting multi-cloud. Okay, so let's talk about the cost of multi-cloud. And I've mentioned cost quite a few times because look, all of this stuff is costly. Cloud is an enterprise solution. An enterprise solution, you know what enterprise solution means? That means expensive. That means complicated, potentially. The cost for redundant resources, I always say if you're going multi-cloud for redundancy, you're paying for infrastructure twice. But it's actually worse than that. It's actually a lot worse than that, because you're paying for infrastructure twice, and you're paying for all the operational complexity, and you're paying potentially to hire two different staffs, which IT people are expensive and they're kind of a pain in, well, they're expensive. And also something that is a little bit of a secret in cloud, and if you're intimately involved in cloud all the time, you know this, data movement. Cloud providers are almost always very welcoming when you bring data in. They'll say, you can move all your data in for free. What they don't tell you is that they hit you up when the data leaves. There are costs associated with the data leaving their cloud. So if you have two cloud providers, the cost of moving that data from one cloud provider to another one, there is a cost associated with that. And it's probably a cost per gigabyte. So being aware of these things, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that being aware of these costs is very, very important. Being aware that it is going to cause operational complexity. How are we going to manage this? How are we going to train for this? Do we have to have somebody that knows both? Or are we going to have to hire somebody that for each? It may be that one public cloud has a lot of employees available. Maybe you can easily hire an Azure person. But if you have to have an Oracle cloud person, maybe that person's going to be hard to hire. So you'll have to train somebody, or if they're unwilling and able, you might be stuck without personnel to run the multi-cloud solution that you've put together, which is not good, which is absolutely terrible. Okay, so let's talk about if you're going to do hybrid or multi-cloud, how do you make it easier? Let's talk about some of the things that will make it easier for you. Architectural planning. If you're going to put something like this together, you need to have a good plan and you need to think about it. Moving from on-prem to cloud is a little bit complex, and a lot of people will just lift and shift everything from on-prem to cloud, and that's reasonable. I think it's better to refactor a little bit so that you use some of the advantages of cloud, but that's fine. But if you're moving from on-prem to multiple clouds, or you're moving from single cloud to maybe another cloud, you need to be thinking about how this is all going to work. And if you don't have the expertise in-house for that, you don't have time, you don't have people that can dedicate themselves to thinking through these problems, you're going to need help. Infrastructure as code. I recommend that if you're doing any kind of architecture, new development stuff, that you use infrastructure as code. Use something like Terraform that is cloud agnostic. It can be used on multiple different cloud solutions. You could use something like ARM or CAK or something like that, but I would recommend maybe using something, especially if you're thinking about going hybrid or multi-cloud, use something that is platform agnostic like Terraform or Pulumi. CI/CD, absolutely, you should have ways to update and push new code out and fix things in an automated fashion, because it is too difficult to do all of this stuff manually. And if you're doing hybrid or multi-cloud, it is going to become a nightmare if you don't have automated deployments and ways to kind of track how all this stuff is going, testing, static code analysis, that kind of thing. You need to really be on top of it, and you need to have a very mature software lifecycle to be able to make it. Single source authentication. So if you're going to do multi-cloud, I would recommend having one way to authenticate across multiple clouds and even on-prem. Something like Auth0 might be a good solution, a third-party solution, perhaps. Not advocating for any particular one, but that would be something that you need to build into how you do things. Cloud cost management tools. So I mentioned how I've made the statement before with cloud that it is very obscure and very, esoteric, I guess is the word I would use, as far as how things are built on the cloud. And I would say that organizations need a lot more intelligence in how they look at cloud costs. I would say probably at the other side of it is that it's maybe borderline almost dishonest by the clouds, because the way they bill feels like it's meant to trip people up. And there are a lot of people that get tripped up with it and don't understand why their bill is all of a sudden $10,000 higher than it was last week. Using effective cost management tools, having personnel that are educated about how cost management is dealt with is so important in any cloud solution, but it is more so in multi-cloud, to be able to figure out how to get that billing so that you understand what you're spending and why you're spending it. If you want to look more at platform engineering, so CI/CD, infrastructure as code, all that kind of stuff is very much in the wheelhouse of platform engineering. I would go check out Andy Hansen's talk, and you can hit up that QR code and go see it. It's on demand now. It's already happened, but you can go watch it anytime and get it. I thought it was like probably a very good core talk on what platform engineering is. If you don't understand DevOps, or you don't understand platform engineering, or there's things that are missing from your understanding, go check out his talk. It is excellent. Okay, so what's right for my particular organization? I'm going to give you the stereotypical consultant answer. It really just depends on what you're facing, because look, there is no one size fits all with this. There are definitely best practices. There are definitely patterns to follow. However, it just varies so much from organization to organization. That's why you need a partner to help you figure it out. You need technical expertise. You need some people that have been there. We've been there. Improving has been there. You need somebody that's going to reduce your risk. It's easy to fall into a trap on something you haven't done before. We've done this over and over again. You need somebody to kind of watch out for cost. You need somebody to train your people so that when we've set up a solution for you, they'll know what to do. They'll know how to maintain it. Somebody that knows the tools, that knows how to optimize it as things go by. Somebody that has vendor relationships. So we're an organization that has partnerships with AWS, with Azure. We have partnerships with people like Snowflake, like Confluent. And those relationships help us to get you the best deal, to help organizations that we work with to get the best deal on things. And occasionally there's partner benefits for migrating to the cloud. It's not something that's guaranteed, but it is something that we try our best to help with anybody that comes to us to partner with us to help them with their cloud journey. Here's the conclusion. Does your cloud strategy meet your business needs? That's the only question. If you don't take anything out of this whole presentation, know that if your cloud strategy has not been engineered to fulfill a business need, then there's something wrong. That's the only thing. We at IT and the cloud team, we're subordinate to what the business needs. And if we're not fulfilling what the business needs, then we need to refactor that strategy so that the business can achieve what they're trying to accomplish. Okay, so before we start taking some questions, so the top QR is for more Tomorrow Technology Today talks. There are a couple that are coming up because why not? Preston is going to be talking about data, and Kevin's going to be talking about AI. And both these guys are absolutely passionate about their subjects. Preston is a great data guy, and Kevin, I don't know anybody that is more enthusiastic about AI than Kevin, about people I really know. So go check those talks out. If you are not able to attend the day of, they will be posted. The recordings will be reposted later. Please go check those out. And the lower QR is my LinkedIn QR. So connect with me on LinkedIn and we can chat more. But let's take some questions, shall we?
Absolutely. Let's, if you raise your hand, I'll let you have the microphone and you can ask questions.
Do we have any in the chat also? I see a couple.
Nope, the chat has been me.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Yeah, this has been a really interesting, Daniel. If I could throw in a question of my own, is there, when you talk about hybrid cloud solutions, is there a set of problems that tend to be a good place for that interface between like two different solutions or two different providers? You know how you had the Venn diagrams at the beginning? Is there like a set of problems that would be really good in that Venn diagram?
Right. I mean, so I think probably the biggest thing is, okay, so we mentioned AI just a second ago. I think most people are running AI not using on-premises data centers. I have my brother-in-law is a PhD student at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech has some big computers, and they are able to run stuff on Georgia Tech's campus. But most people are not using their compute workloads that are on-prem for running AI stuff. They're using the cloud for sure. So even if they have a lot of stuff that's on-prem, their hybrid solution may be, oh, there's a problem. We need to throw a lot of compute resources at this. So we're going to go to the cloud for that. So the convergence of cloud and on-prem may be there, right there. I mentioned problem solving with just business tools. Do you really want to try to maintain a chat app or an exchange server? Or I mean, because I remember the old days, we used to have like whole teams that would manage these tools that were internal tools. And I went and looked at the pricing for, say, Office 365, and they have different tiers and everything of it, but $12 a month, $8 a month per person, on your team. Are you going to be able to hire somebody, pay for resources, and run all that yourself? Or do you just have Microsoft run teams? And are you going to be able to do that better than yourself? Better than them? And it's probably not the case. Maybe,
Makes sense.
But yeah.
You mentioned cost management and how critical it is to manage that when deploying cloud solutions and environment. Any tools or other methods that you have experience with to help manage and gain visibility to that costs?
Yes. So the first place I would start is I would start by using the native cloud tools that they have. So I've mentioned how a lot of times the cloud providers are accused of not being very transparent with their cost and not really, maybe even being a little bit predatory with how they're doing costs. And I think that might be a little bit unfair, because some of the cost management tools that are in the cloud are very good at forecasting, at showing what things are. You can dig down, you can drill down and look at the costs. They're different I could throw some names out, but they're different from each native cloud. So if you're in AWS, I'd go look at the AWS tools. If you were in Azure, I'd go look at the Azure tools and drill down and kind of look at some of these and get familiar with the dashboards. And also just looking at the pricing pages and just seeing how things are priced will give you an idea. And I think it's really about getting into the mindset of how the OpEx of the cloud is different than, say, CapEx of doing an on-prem solution. If you buy a server on-prem, you paid for it whether it's running all the time or it's only being used a couple hours a day. When you're in the cloud, if you're using it all the time, it's a different cost than just a couple hours a day. So I think it's a bit of a shift in the way things are thought about. And it's a bit of a shift. It's definitely a shift in paradigm, for sure.
Well, okay, let's wrap things up then. Thank you again for joining us. Let's give another round of applause for Daniel Brown. I think we can all agree that the future of platform engineering is more treat than trick. Speaking of treats, we've got another haunting good session coming up on November 5th. And let me clear up any confusion about the time. We'll be gathering at 12 p.m. Central. That's high noon after the time change this weekend. Join us as Jeff Armstrong and Kate Orr cast their spell on data analytics with agile decision-making with Fabric. They'll show you how to banish those technical debt demons and summon the power of modern analytics platforms. Think of it as your magic potion for tightening the loop between engineers, analysts, and leadership teams. You'll learn how to enchant your data infrastructure, cut costs, and drive your business forward. No crystal ball needed. Don't forget to register through the link we'll drop in the chat. And remember, that's noon Central Time on Tuesday. Trust me, this is one cauldron of knowledge you don't want to miss. Thank you all for being such a fantastic audience today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember, in the world of platform engineering, the only thing we have to fear is outdated infrastructure itself. Stay spooky, everyone.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for attending. Y'all have a good one.